Welcome to Pause to Go, the podcast that's all about making the most of life's transitions from middle school through menopause. I'm your host, Bree Luck, joining you as we embark on a journey of self-discovery and questionable decisions. Get ready for heartfelt conversations, expert insights, and personal stories that'll have you laughing, crying, and saying, "Thank goodness I'm not alone." If you've lost your midlife crisis survival kit, we've got you covered. So join me, won't you? And together we can pause to go. Today, we have a solo episode, so it'll be a little shorter. And I really wanted to talk about something that I resist, which is the idea of mindset in perimenopause and menopause. And I don't want this to come across as a toxic positivity or as making light of the very real challenges that we face as aging humans in a culture that is not sensitive or compassionate towards aging humans, particularly those of us who present as women. But we know that our mindset significantly influences how we perceive ourselves and navigate life's changes. And so this week, I took a look at a couple of studies in support of that. And I was really moved by Carol Mishkin's conversation with me last week. We were talking about navigating the relationship with our adult children, and she pointed out to me that I was using some language that might be limiting language. And the way that she presented it, that I think resonates with a lot of people, was in terms of energetics and the energy that we're putting into the world and how it comes back. I know that resonates with a lot of my peers, a lot of my friends, a lot of people. And so I'm so glad that she spoke about it in that way. But I got to be honest, it doesn't always resonate with me to talk about energetics. I have a couple of ideas for why, but I'm not going to get into them right now. But I wanted to look at some psychological studies to see if there is any evidence that language had an effect on personal outcomes. And so today I'm going to talk about a couple of studies that looked at that and also share some ideas for how we might implement or practice having a more growth-oriented or positive mindset so that we can enhance our well-being and our resilience. So this isn't necessarily about not having any issues or menopausal or perimenopausal challenges. It's really about how to be resilient in the face of challenges. And honestly, for me, that seems like the most reasonable way to move forward. So as I share this, I want you to know I'm also practicing this imperfectly, very imperfectly. All right, let's get going. There are lots of studies that show that a positive mindset can enhance our overall well-being and resilience. So let's take a closer look at the power of our self-talk and its impact on our experiences. So Dr. Carol Dweck is a professor of psychology at Stanford University, and she coined the two most used terms about mindset in her book. Her book is called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, published in 2006. So it's not a new book, but it's still seen as one of the seminal books on mindset work. So in this book, she discusses two different types of mindset. So there's growth mindset and there's a fixed mindset. So people with a growth mindset essentially believe that change is possible. And people with a fixed mindset believe that they can't change anything about their situation or their outcome. So if we look at this in terms of menopause and aging, some people dread menopause. We think it will be a terrible experience and there's nothing that we can do about it. We think that about aging, that as we age, all of these terrible things are going to happen and we're going to be miserable. Others keep a more open mindset and believe that aging may be a challenging process, but that there are things that can be done to minimize the effects or to take advantage of some of the assets of aging. And some of the assets might be striving less, feeling more comfortable with who you are, feeling like you're not having to prove things anymore, right? There are all sorts of positives to aging too. So let's return for a moment to growth mindset. Understanding and adapting to a situation is a significant component of a growth mindset. And the underlying question there is, what can I do to make the best of this situation? I'm going to repeat that question because it's one that I'm going to be asking myself in the coming weeks and really taking note of it. I keep a journal, so I'm going to keep note in my journal. And I encourage you to do the same if you want to join me in this quest to cultivate a growth mindset around aging. So again, that is, what can I do to make the best of this situation? This is a language issue, right? So it turns out that when we are talking about language, the words we use have a huge impact on whether we are in a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. So when people experience something that brings on discomfort, such as, I don't know, kids leaving for college or having a particularly painful menstrual period, we could describe it as a stressor or we could describe it as a challenge. Studies indicate that people who use terms like challenge, which is growth-oriented, it's a growth-oriented term, we overcome a challenge, those people have a more positive outlook and fewer negative symptoms than people who use terms like stressors, which leads us to have a fixed mindset. So returning to last week's episode with Carol Mishkin, she encouraged me to use the word challenging instead of the word hard. And I found it really interesting to look at it in terms of psychology because it offers further support for paying attention to the way our words impact our actions. Another aspect of mindset within menopause is that it can really influence what a person expects the outcome to be. For example, let's suppose a woman believes menopause will be full of symptoms. That person has a higher risk of experiencing symptoms, while people with a more positive attitude toward menopause report having fewer symptoms. In 2015, there was a study that really looked at mindset and menopause and health outcomes there. So when a person believes that menopause will be full of symptoms, they have a higher risk of experiencing those symptoms, while people with a more positive attitude report having fewer symptoms. Another way to see this phenomenon is the placebo versus the nocebo effect. So you've probably heard of the placebo effect. That's when we're given something like a sugar pill, but we think that it is medicine, and then our bodies respond, our symptoms improve, we have positive expectations, and then our health improves, right? That's the placebo effect. The nocebo effect is if we feel like something bad is going to happen, if we feel like we're going to have negative symptoms or uncomfortable symptoms, then we experience them more often. And that was found in a study by Koloka and Barsky in 2020. So the North American Menopause Society, that's NAMS, by the way, if you are wanting to find some great health resources on menopause and perimenopause, and or if you are looking for a healthcare provider who is well versed in menopause, check out the NAMS website. They have so many resources, and I highly, highly, highly encourage you to check them out. I get their weekly newsletter. It's super informative. Anyway, NAMS also highlights the fact that many of the changes that come with menopause are not necessarily avoidable, but how a person experiences menopause has a lot to do with mindset and attitude. So, what does that mean? It means that we need to watch how our language is coming up. It means that we have an opportunity to really change our mindset. And it takes practice. It's not simple when we have so much negativity coming our way. So I just want to acknowledge that. And also, when we are already feeling negative, it's easy to get into even more negative or limiting self-talk. So looking at this, and I'm going to pull it out beyond menopause and perimenopause for a moment, because I don't think that this is exclusive to people in perimenopause and menopause. This is for all people. I care about it in terms of perimenopause and menopause because that's what we're talking about here. But I've also been just thinking about how we reify negative mindset and negative self-talk in even the most subtle ways. And they are subtle ways that are then culturally reinforced. And one of those subtle ways of culturally reinforcing negative self-talk is engaging in self-deprecating language and behaviors. Women do this a lot. I do this a lot. I'm going to give an example now that I think is very easy to isolate. That's why I'm giving this example, because we have to practice changing our negative self-talk. We have to practice cultivating a positive mindset. And it's a lot to just expect that to happen across the board, but there are specific ways where we can really remember, oh, here is an opportunity to turn this around, to practice eliminating negative self-talk and reducing negative self-talk. And that is around accepting compliments. Often women tend to downplay compliments. We dismiss our accomplishments and our attributes, and we often deflect or downplay or apologize even in the face of compliments. Sometimes we will do something that's only marginally better, which is to pay the other person a compliment, right? To deflect from ourselves and put the attention on the other person. But studies show that accepting compliments with appreciation and owning our achievements can boost self-esteem and self-worth. So we're so afraid that we're going to come across as conceited or highfalutin, or I don't even know, honestly, vain, right? That we're so afraid of that we're actually damaging our self-esteem and damaging our self-worth by deflecting compliments. It's just wild. So compliments are intended to make people feel good. But instead, many of us feel uncomfortable, and the compliment ends up evoking pre-existing self-doubts. And then we fail to accept the praise from other people. And this is problematic, again, as I mentioned before, because of the way that it's tied to self-esteem and self-worth. But it's also problematic because exchanging compliments is a key means by which partners show positive regard for each other. And feeling positive regard by one's partner or friend or colleague is an essential ingredient for relationship satisfaction. This comes out of a study by Murray, Bellavia, Rose, and Griffin from 2003. So what we find is that people who have low self-esteem have difficulty accepting compliments. And then what may happen, we don't know, of course, but what may happen is that difficulty in accepting compliments that need to deflect then actually hurts the relationship and creates really a negative cycle there. So this is the challenge for this week, to lean into a compliment. Lean into them. At the very least, just say thank you. Just say thank you, take a deep breath, say thank you, and take it in. You can even lean into it more, though. What happens if you take it to the next level? So I'm going to tell you a quick story now about a recent experience I had with really struggling to, and then ultimately accepting a compliment. And it begins with body issues. So if you are struggling with body issues right now, I encourage you to skip this part or just prepare yourself for it, because I do talk a bit about my own relationship with my body at this moment in time. So I have had a lot of issues feeling comfortable wearing a bathing suit in public spaces recently without a cover up or without some kind of something to cover me up. It is all about me. I'm just owning that. This is my stuff. And I know that I'm not alone. I know that this is a fairly common occurrence for women, perhaps in general, perhaps all people, many bodies. There's a lot of body shame, but I've noticed it far more in the last couple of years as my body is shifting in perimenopause. So this week I decided to just go ahead and wear my two-piece. I was meeting a couple of friends and I put on a bikini and I was with my friends. One of my friends said to me, "Bree, you have a really great ass." And, my first impulse was to deflect. My first impulse was to say how hard I'd been working out, or that it's not as good as it used to be, or that they have a great ass too, or whatever, right? It was like my first impulse was to deflect. But instead of doing that, I just leaned into it and I just said, thanks. And I really took it in. And I was like, you know what? I do have a cute butt. And what's more, that butt has really served me well. I sit on it. It walks me up hills. I went for a big hike the day before. And let me tell you, those glutes were really coming in handy. And I really took the moment when I got the compliment, instead of immediately going to all the reasons why I should deflect and be modest in this moment, right? It's about modesty. I decided to lean into celebrating this compliment. So I said, thank you. I thought about how great my little tush is and all that it has done for me. And then she asked if she could take a picture of it. She was joking. I was like, yeah, you can take a picture. And so it turned into this really funny, silly conversation, this sharing, this moment of playful intimacy between friends. And that was something that had been lacking for me. And so while there was part of me that was cringing and even telling you here on the podcast, I'm thinking, "Oh my god, this isn't intellectual. This is objectification." But you know what? It's not really. It's celebrating. It's celebrating a part of my body that I really feel like is worth celebrating right now. And I was really excited that my dear friend Mendy gave a little shout out to my butt that is usually covered up. It's usually pretty hidden. And so all week, y'all, I've just been celebrating my tush. So celebrate. Maybe it's your body, maybe it's not. I'm not going to get too much into body neutrality or body positivity. I'm not an expert on this. I'm just sharing my perspective. And so now there are three things that I'm going to leave you with. I said I was going to give you one, but I'm really going to give you three. So, number one is when faced with a challenging situation, to ask yourself, what can I do to make the best of this situation? So, I have put that statement on a Post it note. I've just done it while I've been recording this. I've written it on a Post it note and I'm putting it above my computer, and I'm going to do another one and put it in my car. Those are the two places where I tend to ruminate over negative things. So I'm going to put that question, what can I do to make the best of this situation, in those places and think about it when I hit upon something challenging. And if that resonates with you, you can try that too. Let me know if it works. The next thing is to just freaking accept a compliment, lean into the compliment. Don't deflect, don't feel any need to do anything other than accept the compliment. Thank you. Thank you. I agree. Thank you. I love it too. Thank you. Thank you for noticing. You practice some ways of thanking people because it does take some practice, I will say. Like, I'm even laughing right now. It's a little nervous laughter because I know how hard it is to do that. Okay, and the third thing is celebrate your booty. Maybe it's not your booty. Maybe it's some other part of you. But what is some part of you, whether it's the way that your brain comes up with jokes or songs, or the way that you remember things, or maybe it's that you've noticed that you've gotten stronger in time, or what is it about yourself? Just think of something that maybe is underrated. What is an underrated aspect of yourself? And really lean into it this week. Celebrate it. Give it a little more positive, give it a little more love. And why? Because we know that it makes a difference. And that may be because of energetics, or it may be because of psychology. It doesn't really matter, honestly. Just like a placebo effect. Does it really matter why it works? It's nice because it's replicable. But for now, just maybe knowing that it works is enough. So thank you for joining me today. Next week, I'm sharing an interview with my friend Jamie Verotzko, who shares her perimenopause story. And it's a positive one. You want to talk about growth mindset. She really shows how she moved into a growth mindset herself. I found her story to be really inspirational, and I hope that you do too. So join me next week for that. And until then, stay curious, y'all. Here's my call to action for this episode. That's what they call it when I'm trying to get you to do something. I want you to do something, and that is to share your story. So if you would like to share an experience of your midlife delights, agony, or just plain humor, you can leave me a voice memo on my new website, pausetogopodcast.com. There's a tab on the right side of the website that says something like, leave me a voice memo. And you can. You can just record a voice memo for me right there and I'll get it. And if you feel comfortable having me share your voice on the pod, then I can share that with everyone. It's so nice to hear other people's voices. But if you don't feel comfortable having me share your voice, I can just anonymously share your story. It'll be great to have your stories on the Pause to Go podcast. All right, stay curious, y'all. Thank you for listening to the Pause to Go podcast. Special thanks to Codebase Co-working and WTJU Radio for their support. This has been an Awkward Sage production.